Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Prayer is to the soul what breathing is to the body. Therefore, prayer is essential to everybody, but even more so to those who will lead, who play a position that comes to them from God in our world. Without a doubt, each of us has their own way to pray and express their heart to God. But the Catholic tradition holds many devotions which can help us to find discipline and regularity in our prayer. One of these is the Breastplate of St. Patrick, an excellent prayer to say at the beginning of every workday. You know, a retreat is a very powerful time for us, and taking a retreat as business leaders is essential. By retreat, what do we mean? It's actually the French word retraite, which means to retirer, to draw yourself back from, right? To pull out, literally, of what we do every single day in order to do it better. This is what, of course, Stephen Covey refers to when he talks about sharpening the saw, right? And I mean, if you take the time to sharpen the saw, you'll cut down more trees and you'll cut them down faster because you stopped working, right? And so many of us, we're just kind of cruising through. We get into a rhythm that we love because we're made by God, I would say, to do things and to get the next thing done. That's why he's got us. We're drivers, we're innovators, we're men and women of action. And that's what's gotten us where we are now. But let's be honest, action itself flows from inaction, just like words flow from silence and love flows from being loved. I mean, there's a source to you. There's something bigger than you that is the driving you forward. And the reason you are great is not you. Okay? You are great, but you are great because you're in search of something. You're moving towards something that pre-existed before you. So it's there because you're in touch with what is greater than you, you have found the source of true greatness. All right. So in a retreat is that time. It's that time to bathe deeply in that source, the wellspring of the passion and the fury that you have inside of your heart every single day. This is that drive that put you through college, that allowed you to excel, that made you start in your career, and that's guided you every day when you get up every morning and you go back at it again and again and again and again. There's something inside there that needs to be fed. Because if we don't feed it with the right type of energy, it can turn into selfishness. And instead of drive for the good, instead of seeing our life as a real act of service and love that can help others and glorify God, well, it can become wearisome in the end. And you have folks with so much excellence who are wearied of being excellent. That should never happen. And we become bitter, we become old, we don't need to. On the contrary, we can rekindle the love. We can find the deeper fire. But to do that, we have to retirer. We have to go on to retreat. We have to pull back, pull out, and then plunge deep into the wellspring, the clear, beautiful, life-giving water of the love that is in our hearts that comes from God. Right? This is something that the more that we do this, the more powerful that will be. I remember speaking with a high school president, and he has, of course, a very big challenge in front of him. He's leading his high school, and he said every morning he wakes up, and the first hour and a half of his day, he claims for himself. Now, he wakes up early at about 4:30 in the morning to do this, but he takes that hour and a half for himself and for God. So he takes a cold plunge, and then he goes into a hot tub after that, and he does his prayers, and he focuses himself on his day. He gets in touch with his inner core, with the love that's in his heart that comes to him from God before his kids even wake up and before the day even begins. And he said to me that that's the secret of his success. Well, Mother Teresa did a similar kind of thing. She didn't do a cold plunge, But what Mother did is, and what all of her sisters do, she gets them up at 4 a.m, and they spend from 4:30 to 7:30 in the chapel in prayer. They do an adoration time. They do vocal prayers. They have mass. And she says, I begin the day by letting Jesus use me, and then I let everybody else use me. You could read so many stories of saints. There's so many stories of great individuals, and all of them will have something in common. All of them are in tune with their heart, with a depth of identity deep down inside of them. Now, some of them are less in tune, or their hearts are really kind of shallow and not good. But a Christian's heart, it's like a faucet. We open it and let God out. Right? When we bathe ourselves in God, when we plunge our hearts in God, everything we do becomes a hymn of praise back to Him. Everything that we do becomes an expression of that deeper love, right? Because we realize that our life isn't about us. It's like that great line I love from a Catholic thinker named Scott Hahn. He has a little quote that I think is great. He says, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about all day long. Right? So he was kind of joking around, right? Saying, and I think a lot of us find ourselves in the same situation, right? But but our success will come the moment when we get over ourselves. When we realize and look deep down inside the eyes of everyone else and we say, I'm doing this for you. Because when that happens, we unlock an energy inside of ourselves. Like we open ourselves now to become instruments of God. Because God is doing it for them. And our life finds meaning, and our business and our professions find meaning. We understand what we're doing every day as a doctor or as a lawyer. We're not just processing claims. We're not just checking people out at the grocery market. We're serving them. And it feeds our heart and our souls. When we're doing it we're in the right place, we realize that we're deploying our greatness at the service of a great thing. And if you can't do that in your career itself because you're kind of stuck in a position, you can always do it by working for God. In the Bible, there's the letter to Philemon, where he's actually speaking to a slave. And he's like, if you can't change your position in life, at least do it for God. Serve God and be a slave in your heart to God. Right? So do what you do, and then you'll be free in your soul at least. Well, it's the same thing for us. We might feel like we're slaves in our bodies to our professions, to where our situations are, and you might be, but you can always be free in your soul. And that comes from in that contact, that daily contact with God. Prayer is so important unless you're busy, and then it's essential. The busier you are, the more prayer that you need. How do you expect your actions so abundant to maintain their focus and to hit their mark and to also feed your soul instead of just taking energy out of your soul if your soul itself isn't in touch with something bigger, right? So the more that I'm in touch with God, the more my activity will be vibrant, will also be effective and on target because I'm aiming it towards this great mystery that has claimed my life. This one whom I have chosen to love because I've discovered His love for me. It's almost like life becomes a romance of sorts, an expression of a mystery that's bigger than what we have. I understand that many people don't have faith. I understand that many people struggle with their faith. I want to encourage you all to not be afraid of discovering this mystery of life, the secret that is God's love for you. Because the more that you discover that, well, the more that everything that you do in the positions that you have will have this meaning and also will be full of significance. And that starts with our daily prayer. And so I want to help you, teach you on this retreat how to make that prayer, how to pray in a practical way. And I want to use for that an ancient prayer called the Breastplate of St. Patrick.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
Prayer is both an art and a science. Okay, so on the one hand, it's an art, meaning there's an expression of our soul to God that is so unique and so personal and so deep that it needs nothing else but authenticity. And this is a beautiful thing if we can do it, right? The fact is, though, a lot of times we're distracted, or we don't want to take that time to really touch the depths of who we are. And so our prayer can lack that depth because, well, we do in the end. And so even though we know we can achieve it, sometimes people will just say, well, I talk to God all day long. And I believe that too. But there's a time and a place to try to go a little bit deeper. And if we can't find that authenticity by pure focus and entering into pure silence with this gaze upon God of faith, then we can use a crutch. And a crutch will be a prayer that's written for us. Okay, so in our Catholic tradition, this is a marvelous thing that we have. It's called a prayer book. And I know it exists also in non-Catholic Christianity, where you have collections of prayers that are simply the prayers that we've said over the decades. And this is a wonderful thing because they can guide us in our faith. In the Catholic Church, in order to publish a prayer, for example, that's written, you're supposed to get the permission of the bishop, because the bishop is supposed to guarantee that the prayer that you're saying is actually in accordance with the faith. In other words, that what a prayer is that it's being guided by the knowledge, the faith, the knowledge that you have from God to let your heart reach out to him. So now my heart, if I know that the bishop has said this prayer is in accordance with the faith, then I can use its poetry and its powerful imagery and the thoughts that it gives me to let my heart reach out to God. So now I'm praying with the person who wrote the prayer, which is, of course, why we Catholics, we enjoy doing this with the saints, right? Because we're like, these people have then, their lives, or their faith at least, has been sanctioned by the church to say these people are good and reliable guides for us. And so using their ways of praying can therefore inspire our own and can open our hearts to this authentic relationship with Jesus. At the end of every prayer is a surrender of ourselves to God at a personal level. And the prayers can really help because it focuses us and it gives us some food that allows us to move with the thoughts of the saints. So there are many of these devotions, and I recommend them all, really. I mean, Catholic devotions are great. I think it's one of the easiest ways to grow in your spirituality is to buy a prayer book. Like literally. Or people today say, oh, use the prayer app. Okay, well then use the prayer app. Click on that little thing that says prayers, and then choose 5 that you say every morning and 5 that you say every evening. You can even pick the ones that you like. It's fine, There's a prayer to a guardian angel, prayer to St. Joseph for work, a morning offering, prayer before Mass, prayer after Mass. There's all kinds of beautiful prayers that are there. And why not choose 5 that you like in the morning, 5 in your evening? And that way, by saying your prayers, which is this old way of speaking, right? Like I've said my prayers in the morning. We do this for our children. Well, why don't we do it ourselves? By saying your prayers or getting to the office and having the routine of the very first thing, saying a prayer. And of course, you can tape that to your wall right in front of your computer. You can put this on your mirror when you're brushing your teeth. But learning to get into the habit of saying those prayers, it's almost like it doesn't replace the heart. It doesn't replace the freedom of the spirit or that authentic meeting between you and Jesus, but it sure helps. It sure helps. I can guarantee you, if you start putting prayers around and saying them on a routine basis, you're going to notice that your heart has been rendered much more sensitive to the workings of God in the day. Much more sensitive because you've been talking to him throughout the day. And by getting these prayers that come from our Catholic tradition, well, now you're listening to prayers that have been written pointing you towards this mystery by men and women who've loved God in extraordinary ways. If I'm going to have a football coach teach me how to throw a spiral and a weight coach teach me how to lose weight, why wouldn't I have a prayer coach teaching me how to pray? Well, the prayer coach is the saint, and they wrote these prayers for us to say. So it's such an easy and yet effective way of growing in holiness to choose certain prayers and pray them every day. It's called devotions, and you get to pick what ones you like. Now, in the world of devotions, there are many different kinds. There are litanies, which are just kind of like long lists of things with a repetition in them. Of course, there's the rosary. There's novena prayers. There's many different kinds of prayers that have just grown up over 2,000 years of tradition. There's prayers of supplication, prayers of praise. You, of course, praying with the Psalms. You can have liturgical prayer. There's many forms that are out there. And these just are because we're 2,000 years old, okay? And there are also these forms developed in different situations and according to different needs. And the prayer I want to talk to you about today, which is the Breastplate of St. Patrick. It's kind of a strange way of speaking of that. And that's because it's old. I mean, the Breastplate of St. Patrick was a prayer that, according, if we want to believe it, was written all the way in the 400s when St. Patrick was operating in Ireland. He was, of course, a monk who became a priest, became a bishop, was sent to Ireland to evangelize, and did a pretty darn good job. He basically converted the entire country, right? And so this prayer, being a lorica, is the word that they use in Latin. And the lorica is a translation of the Greek word thorax, which St. Paul used in Ephesians 6, when he literally says, put on the armor of God, right? And one of the things that he's saying is put on the breastplate of God. Paul is describing, in other words, that a Christian's life can be seen, one of the metaphors for it is a type of battle, right? And the forces that we're waging war with are forces that are spiritual, that affect our spirit. So on the one hand, you can look at this in terms of evil personified in the devil and his angels, and you could look at it from that angle for sure. And yet at a profound level, what's the devil and his angel? What are they trying to do? They're trying to impact our spirit. They're trying to shape and modulate the way that we see the world and the way that we give our hearts to God. So a spiritual combat needs for us to protect our inner heart, to keep it on fire for God, at the same time for us to express that spirit in a way that's active in our world today. So you can water this down, to make it more practicable and a broader if you want. You can also try to heighten it and say, okay, so this is a battle of spiritual entities between angels and us, and it is that, but it's in the life of St. Paul, I think it can become more practical for us also to be able to say we need to defend our heart. We need to defend our spirit from everything that's negative, from everything that's attached to sin, from everything that's evil, so that it can really be at the service of God and of goodness, and that we can be his servant in the places that we go. And with that prayer in mind, St. Paul says, put on the armor of God, put on the thorax of God, put on the breastplate of God. The Irish monks this would be between the years 500 and 700, developed a series of prayers that we still have today. The earliest copy of this particular prayer comes from the 800s, 300 years after Patrick. And then, of course, it's found again in the year 1100. We have an old edition of it in its entirety. But whether or not it was used by Patrick himself, it's part of a genre of prayers that we can find. There's an old hymn, for example, Be Thou My Vision, which a lot of us like to sing in the Catholic tradition. Be Thou My Vision. Well, that's actually a lorica, or a breastplate prayer of protection that dates all the way back to that same time period, right? There's another type of prayer called a kaim. We have a kaim from Saint Columba, for example, which is a prayer of protection. Okay, so that's what the tradition of this prayer comes in. And why I want to talk to you about it is because by protecting our hearts, not only against evil, but also by inflaming them with faith, these prayers allow us to attack our day and to lead from a point of view of fire and of love. And the prayer is so gorgeous that I'm sure it will help you every day.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
The other day I was having a conversation with a priest, a friend of mine, and he was saying, about his routine in the morning. And he said that every morning he's driving in the car for about a half an hour on his commute to his church. And he said that he spends that time in prayer, and he listens to the liturgy of the hours being prayed, as every priest has to do. And then he usually has another 5 minutes or so before he pulls in the driveway. So he pulls up this hymn, an ancient hymn called the Breastplate of St. Patrick, which is literally the prayer of St. Patrick put into music. And that dates back to the 1880s, 1890s, when that was created and composed. But the reason I said, why do you say that? And he says, because every day then it gives me this wonderful positivity of knowing in faith that I'm rooted in God. It's literally such a powerful prayer because it fixes my heart in Jesus Christ, and it allows me to know that Christ is with me as I begin my day. And that's why I want to share this with you and encourage you to pray it every day, because it's just that it's such a positive prayer. It allows us really to say all the hope that we read of in the Bible, that we know of in our faith. It makes it kind of like sensible and concrete through the lines of beautiful poetry. So the prayer itself has 11 different sections to it, okay? First of all, it starts with 5 invocations, where it's basically saying, I bind unto myself, and then it gives you these 5 different things. Number 1, the Trinity. I bind unto myself. So you can picture like taking a breastplate and then putting it around yourself and tying it on. And what are you tying on? You're tying on Christ's baptism, Christ's death for you, Christ's resurrection, Christ's ascension, and Christ coming at the last day, right? So I'm claiming, in other words, actively by this prayer in my faith, I'm claiming these things. Saying, I'm attaching these to myself and myself to these. What else? The virtues of the angels and the sweetness of the saints and all the goodness of the patriarchs and the martyrs. And then he looks out towards nature and he starts to invoke that. I bind into myself the incredible powers of the sea and the beautiful things that we can see upon the earth. Everything that's positive and that reflects God, he's binding to himself. Of course, it's like an aspiration, right? But that's the beautiful thing of a poem, and the beautiful thing of a prayer. It's a heart's cry. It's an aspiration. It's saying that everything beautiful out there is what I'm going to identify as my base. Not anxiety, not negativity, not bitterness, not unforgiveness, but all the beauty that I see in the natural world. That's what I want to live with it as a reflection of God. The prayer then moves into a spot that could be challenging or at least new for many of you, because he starts listing off the people that are attacking him: false prophets, heretics, witches, wizards, right? And all the different ways that they could attack him. And I would invite you during this to think maybe of the spots in your profession or on your team that you're nervous about, from a manager who has it out against you, to a competitor that's trying to take you down, to a lawsuit that's pending in the courts, or whatever's causing you this, right? You can identify those. These were the particular enemies of Patrick of the day. And of course, they're still out there. But I'm also saying, you can see what the power of this prayer is not limited just to those things. It's saying anyone who would do me harm, anyone who would do me evil. And so insofar as I myself am doing the will of God, I'm asking for protection from, right? And then he goes into the most beautiful part of the prayer that most of us would recognize, where he literally surrounds himself with Christ and begs Jesus to be above him, to be beside him, to be before him, to be behind him. And it touches our hearts deeply when we hear it. And then, of course, he then kind of wraps it up. 11 sections to the prayer. And the basic flow is one of saying, I today am binding to myself, taking upon myself as my shield and the armor of my heart, God himself. And my challenge to you is to live it, to actually be bold enough to dare something great for Christ today, to look upon what you're doing from that angle of having so much worth that God himself needs to protect and defend it. And so now, with your permission, I'm going to go ahead and read the prayer for you. You'll find 2 different translations. I like this one the most. It's the most poetic and the easiest to kind of get into for me. I bind unto myself today the strong name of the Trinity, by invocation of the same, the 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. I bind this day to me forever by power of faith, Christ's incarnation, his baptism in Jordan River, his death on cross for my salvation, his bursting from the spiced tomb, his riding up the heavenly way, his coming at the day of doom, I bind unto myself today. I bind unto myself the power of the great love of cherubim, the sweet well done in judgment hour, the service of the seraphim, confessor's faith, apostles' word, the patriarch's prayers, the prophet's scrolls, all good deeds done unto the Lord, and purity of virgin souls. I bind unto myself today the virtues of the starlit heaven, the glorious sun's life-giving ray, the whiteness of the moon at even, the flashing of the lightning free, the whirling wind's tempestuous shocks, the stable earth, the deep salt sea, around the old eternal rocks. I bind unto myself today the power of God to hold and lead, his eye to watch, his might to stay, his ear to hearken to my need, the wisdom of my God to teach, his hand to guide, his shield to ward, the word of God to give me speech, his heavenly host to be my guard. Against the demon snares of sin, the vice that gives temptation force, the natural lusts that war within, the hostile men that mar my course, or few or many, far or nigh, in every place and in all hours, against their fierce hostility, I bind to me these holy powers. Against all Satan's spells and wiles, against false words of heresy, against the knowledge that defiles, against the heart's idolatry, against the wizard's evil craft, against the death wound and the burning, the choking wave, the poison shaft, protect me, Christ, till thy returning. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. I bind unto myself the name, the strong name of the Trinity, by invocation of the same, the three in one and one in three, by whom all nature hath creation, eternal Father, Spirit, Word, praise to the Lord of my salvation. Salvation is of Christ the Lord. Amen. St. Patrick, pray for us.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.